Thank you, James. Thank you, Veronica. And thank you all who have walked in not realizing that you are the panel today. So I'm going to be facilitating. This topic came up recently in the SREcon Americas or the general channel, I don't recall which. Trying to understand, when we say SRE, you say SRE, are we talking about the same thing? And in some cases, not necessarily. So I want to lay a few ground rules out. This is exploratory. We are crowdsourcing it. I have two fine scribes down here in the front. You will see links to their resources down there in the lower right-hand corner. I know it's a little bit hard to read, but this will be available afterwards, and we'll post it in the Slack channel as well. So we want to make sure that people do not feel blamed for deficiencies that they may perceive in their own organization or deficiencies and aspersions they want to cast on other organizations. So let's keep this positive and let's describe the state we're in, because whitewashing the situation also doesn't help anybody. It just makes everybody else feel like they haven't gotten where they need to be. And we're looking for understanding, not judgment. So, two places to go here. This is what is down in the lower corner. You can go to SRE Across Companies on the Slack channel. Emil is our scribe for Slack. He'll be prompting people. If the mic can't get to you, feel free to contribute in that channel. And then we'll absorb that input into the Google Doc, which Murali up here is going to be taking notes on. You're welcome to join the Google Doc. It should be open for public collaboration, and make your own contributions there as well. Or if your comments are not adequately reflected, you can gloss on what Murali records. So I have 7 questions, and this is all you're going to get to look at during the rest of this session. And we put this together, and what I'd like you to describe as the microphones come around to you is that for you as an individual at your company, or on a particular team, or perhaps you can speak across your organization, where does SRE report? How does it connect into the hierarchy of your company? Who defines the reliability targets that SREs are working to achieve and engineering teams are working to achieve? How do you as an SRE decide what you're going to work on? How do you engage with your feature teams for planning future work, both yours and theirs? What sorts of things would you consider in your current work environment, or perhaps at other companies where you've worked as an SRE, that is not SRE work? This is going to be especially valuable for people who've moved from one company to another and have seen firsthand the contrast between how things are done and what is and is not SRE work. So who would own those things? Because some companies, building a data center, as we just heard, is an SRE role. At other companies, that's not an SRE role. And then, by whom and how does toil get controlled? As an SRE, if you're feeling overloaded with toil, who and how does that get controlled and mitigated? And what constitutes success for your SRE team? How do you know at the end of a quarter, at the end of the year, that you were successful? With that, I would like to invite our panelists to contribute. So, James and Veronica have the mics. Please raise your hands. They'll come around and let you talk to any or all of these topics. You don't need to feel like you need to address them all. If you have something interesting to say on any of the 7 topics, please feel free.
I guess I'll go first. I'm Ian Mahaney with Capital One. I lead SRE for the bank line of business. How does SRE connect with our hierarchy? I report directly to our CIO, right? So there's kind of 3 verticals underneath our CIO within the bank. One is kind of front-end development, one is kind of back-end development, and then the other is site reliability engineering. So it's all the way at the top. It's a heavy focus for us. We're making huge investments in it, from Rich Fairbank and Rob Alexander, our global CIO, all the way down. Who defines reliability targets? For us, It's really a mix between product and SRE and our application teams. So we are a product-led organization, right? We have product managers and lane leaders for each of those, and they work with our engineers to really define what our SLOs are, and that really defines our targets and what we're looking to achieve. How do you decide what to work on? Once again, this is also a mix. Our SRE model is what I call a hybrid model, right? So we have SREs that are embedded within our application teams. They work underneath that product manager. They work from the same backlog. They participate in Scrum or Stand Up. And then we have what we call our SRE pod, which are horizontals that really work across application teams. They work on SRE product. So we have our own products within Capital One that we develop that are used across all of our application teams. So when we look at what we work on, the engineers that are embedded, they really look with the product manager to kind of define their backlog and define what's important to them. And then the horizontals, of course, have their own product managers, and they work together to define that work. How do we engage with feature teams regarding planning future work? This is also based on the embedded engineers. They are working with the application teams to kind of look at toil and what's happening within that team, how much manual work is going on, how do they reduce that, how can they implement automation to be able to perform a number or a good amount of that work. And once again, it's more of a, how are we doing in incidents, how are we doing in achieving our SLOs, what's the customer experience? And when we're not achieving those, we tend to have some of those SRE initiatives move higher to the top of the list. I'm going to skip 5 and 6 because I've been talking for a while already. So I'll go down to what is success for our SRE team. The way that I define SRE, and I always say there's power in simplicity, and I try to keep things as simple as I can. My SREs, their goal is really to make the systems better that they support. It's as simple as that. There's certain success criteria that each of them look to achieve. Obviously, one of those is meeting our SLOs, creating a great customer experience for the products that they support. So, number one on the list is really achieving those SLOs at the end of the year. And it's more than just at the end of the year. Like we kind of iterate through this all the time. Mm-hmm. But there's other things. How do we eliminate toil? What is our, what is our split between toil and project work? And we really try to stay below that 50% threshold and really get engineers focused more on that project work that's really going to be long-term and help the engineering teams or product and engineering teams be more successful for our customers. But we have a kind of a checklist, let's say, of 8 or 9 items that they really go through and try to be able at the end of the year check those off and be like, yep, we did this, we did this, we did this, we did this. And that really kind of determines the success for the SRE teams.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you for being our first panelist. So, who else would care to comment on any or all of these? Here's one in the front row, James.
Hi, I'm Patrick. I work at Atlassian, so Jira, Trello, Opsgenie, Status Page, a million other tools. Products, sorry. We have 8 different SRE product teams that actually work inside products. They're all, almost all of them report centrally to the head of SRE, which reports into our CTO. So we sit inside engineering. We honestly have a hard time sometimes relating reliability back to our business, only because we're typically subscription-based rather than transactional-based. So reliability has a proxy essentially to get to actual business metrics, which is kind of interesting for us. Our reliability targets are typically defined by engineering leads and product teams. They set the SLOs, and then we work with teams to meet that. SRE has their own backlog in most teams typically, so that kind of answers number 3. Yeah, I guess success for us is making sure we meet customer expectations and that reliability problems don't surface up in customer satisfaction surveys, and that's how we typically view success and value and how we add, I guess, more revenue or MAU to the company.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Or who's next, I should say. raise your hand.
I have one if you don't mind, Kurt.
Please.
Let me just move away from that. Okay. So at Quantopian, we use like somewhat embedded teams. So we have like feature teams, and each SRE is attached to one team. We rotate periodically, like every several months, just so we get some variety in there. So the priority of what we work on is like, first, it's your immediate on-call work. Then it's anything that is required to unblock your team. And then you start getting into more of the cross-cutting concerns for the organization. We're actually pretty self-directed because we're a SRE team of like 4 SREs at like a 30, 40 person company. So we don't have multiple teams. We don't have a lot of top-down direction. So a lot of this is having to understand what the business needs even are and do some of that work ourselves because we don't have a large hierarchy.
Okay, thanks. There's one back toward the back.
Hello. Hey, I work for a very small organization, so we have 9 engineers total. And so a lot of the things that I deal with as their first dedicated ops SRE person are a little different. I think I really started realizing what the breadth was when we had to do an audit and we had to list people's responsibilities. And it turns out like I'm sort of the point person for like typical SRE duties, but also security engineering, corporate IT, and a number of other things that are related but not typically in an SRE job role. So a lot of what we're working on as we grow is figuring out at what point do we need to hire dedicated people for those roles? At what point is the overhead, the mental overhead of trying to wear all these different hats going to be a net, negative for the company? Like at what point do we need to start specializing? But for right now, I find it enjoyable, but I also find it somewhat overwhelming to be the point person for so many different things. And so the typical SRE duties, we're trying to get past the first hurdle. Like how do you set up CI for a company that has run for 6 years without CI, for example? Like there's a little bit of backlog to dig out of. And so I would view my role over the past year has been getting out of a level of technical debt, like repaying a certain amount of technical debt so that we can start thinking about the future instead of just, keeping it going. And then also starting to think about putting in an actual SRE roadmap as opposed to just getting over one hurdle at a time. So I like coming to this conference and I like hearing from people who have teams and can say, yeah, I'll grab some people from the security team to help with this. But at a small organization, it's sometimes just one person or one fraction of one person's time. So, yep, that's it.
All right, thank you. Or as James mentioned, you only have 4 people, and so making teams out of that doesn't make sense. Up by James.
Stig Sorensen at Bloomberg. So we're not a small company. So we sort of operate really with 2 types of SREs. Internally, we call them infrastructure and application SREs. Infrastructure SREs become sort of center of excellence service providers internally for tools and where we can sort of create things that can be reused across the organization by the rest of engineers and SRE teams. And our application SRE teams are aligned with their corresponding feature teams under usually a manager that owns both feature teams and an SRE team. We did that because we found it was easier to bootstrap and get joint ownership, and especially in terms of what they should work on if the manager has more buy-in than having a central organization. So maybe when we get more mature, we will have a central organization, but right now it's sort of not embedded, more aligned side by side. The teams that are most successful have product buy-in and where the businesses actually buy into the future work. But in most cases, the work is defined by the teams themselves based on what they believe their targets should be.
Thank you. There's another one down the row there.
Sorry. I don't actually have a response. I have an additional question to ask that maybe people can answer. I'm Alana Hashman. I currently work at 2 Sigma. And my additional question would be, what does the career path for an SRE look like at your company? So, like, what does a junior SRE do? What does a mid-level SRE do? What does a senior SRE do? What are the responsibilities of a principal SRE?
I have actually heard a number of conversations discussing that topic in the hallway here along the way too. So that's a great, I don't know how well it fits here, but if people wish to comment on that, by all means. One back toward the back there. Oh, James just handed one out, and then back, Veronica's coming around.
Hi, my name is Girish Wadwani. I work for Booz Allen Hamilton, consulting company out of Washington, D.C. I manage all of internal corporate production systems, from user experience to databases and everything in between. We are a very traditional company where we have silos, development, operations, and we have code which is written 25 years ago from COBOL, and there are teams who are trying to do microservices. So yeah, everything in between, right? We do not have an SRE mindset, at least in our corporate culture. What we have is general operation work. Here's a change request, and I'm gonna attach this code, and you're gonna deploy it over the weekend or at night, and you know, general operation stuff, right? I've attended a lot of conferences. This is my first industry conference where it's not a product-based, AWS, Oracle, Ignite, right? So it's been really good to learn and hear from other people on how to do it. So 2 years ago, I started hiring developers first time in the operations team, because obviously the skill set of software development was not there. We started also slowly identify and get in tooling. We got some monitoring platforms like New Relic and Ansible automation, and we have Docker, and Kubernetes is you know, knocking on the door. Hey, look at us, right? So you know, it's been interesting to see how mature other organizations are. And when I look at, you know, like Capital One right here, it's like, oh geez, like how much work we have to do to get there. I think start for me is hiring software developers right from school, and then teaching them about how operations work and what they can bring to the table. The hard part is that when we hire engineers from UVA or Virginia Tech, they come into a mindset saying, hey, I'm gonna build this new cool mobile application, or I'm gonna be working in cloud. And so it's you know, it's an interesting, you know, thing to see how junior developers like develop and learn operations and what it means to write code with infrastructure and things like that. Yeah. So thank you all. Yeah, thank you. And the other mic.
Yeah, I'm Sean Robbins from Limelight Networks. We're a large-scale content delivery network. So who defines reliability targets? It's different for us. It's mainly our customers. Most people who use our network are performance-based. They put us in a load balancer, and when our traffic goes away, it means our network isn't doing well. So we have to design our SLIs around those targets that the customers define, and our SLO is our traffic remaining on our network. So they're very specific to our customer base. Number 3, how do we decide what to work on? We ask, what is the impact of business? So we have our backlog, and some of this times it's toil, sometimes it's a product feature, sometimes it's just paying off technical debt. So we ask ourselves what is important right now, and we kind of prioritize that, and then we sit down with the product team and we say, this is why we think your stuff is lower, and this is why we're going to do these things, and they either shake their head and they agree, or they try to put up a fight of why not, and as long as there's an equal balance between those, it's usually a pretty healthy relationship. And then number 4, how do we engage them? A lot of this is kind of defined from number 2. We actually are asking for new features from our own product. Our development team saying, like, we need more telemetry exposed. We have customers who look at us in this vision that we can't even look at yet, so please build this so that we can build a new SLO and defend our own revenue. And then last, the success of our team. Is our revenue obviously still up? Our traffic is still here. And at the end of the day, are we not on calls? So we heavily try to engage our operations engineering team to do all of the reactive work, and we are typically not on calls. I don't think anybody on my team has been on an incident bridge for over 2 years. So we're doing pretty good at not being on those calls, and we do that through like upkeep of training and just make sure that monitoring items that aren't needed are shut off and updating those as often as you can.
Thank you. Someone else?
Steve Catmull with Health Catalyst, and for the purposes of this, I'd say we're building a data operating system for healthcare applications. I'm going to address questions 4 and 5. How do we engage with feature teams regarding planning? We do it in a couple of different ways. We just went through a reorg, so I'm going to give you 2 perspectives. Before that, we would include them in the meetings, and we would meet about 3 times a year. We're remote first, so we get together in one physical location about 3 times per year to do activities and planning. And we would include them, but that didn't really have the effect we wanted. So we recently reorganized to where we really gave the feature teams operational responsibilities. And that has driven the engagement, combined with that strategic planning. And now we also, from a tactical perspective, we get together and do 2-month plans. Well, we look at the plans for the next 2 months, and we coordinate that way to look at near-term coordination patterns. Question number 5: what sorts of things? How do we choose what things are SRE and what are not? We use team charters. Team charters are given at a high level from our SVP. And then the real work begins to find out how to manage the borders of those charters and how to spell them out and to negotiate with the teams. But we're empowered through autonomy and light alignment to figure that out together. And then when we can't, that's when we escalate it up.
Can you give a few examples of something that would be outside this typical scope for an SRE team?
That's a good question. So, like for example, through this reorg, there was stuff that used to get done that just no longer fits in the current model. So my team is owning that work until it finds a home. And that's just a fact of the way we build our software doesn't always reflect how we organize people in a business. And we are transitioning models. We're being inverted from centralized to distributed, and we're trying to do that while keeping everyone happy in a tight resource environment where resources are hard to come by, right? Everyone's hiring. Yeah. So we just have to map reality with that, and sometimes, don't let perfect get in the way of progress, and so we just have to realize where we're at and keep our directional focus and keep our button on the things that aren't as expected so that we can look for the opportunity to make them look like we want them to.
Okay, thanks. Someone else? Right, 2 rows back there, James.
Hi, I'm Nicholas Bellamy. I work for Google. I was going to answer the bonus question you had on how roles change throughout SRE, so a junior SRE versus a principal SRE. At least for Google, it seems to be that at the bottom of the scale, like a junior SRE, it's mostly you come in, you get work done, that's it. And then as you go up, it's a question of how well you scale yourself. So, somewhere in between, you may be able to create your own project and have your team, implement your idea and guide them and help them. While a principal SRE may be guiding work for a whole org and have some grand idea to implement, but they can't do it themselves, so they have to be able to lead and help people throughout the journey.
Is there a separate track for management, or is it all one?
There are SRE managers, SRMs, but
So we have other people waving to take the mic away from you. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm on one of the management tracks at Google. So we do actually have a number of options for management track in SRE at Google. Obviously, our organization is quite large, and so we have a range of options here. So if you want to do people management and people leadership, There is an SRM function, so you are doing management purely of SRE teams, right? We do actually have a TLM function, so you are functioning as a manager and a technical lead. That is less and less common in SRE than in our SWE organization, however. There is also a TPM track, which is if you want to run matrix teams but not be responsible for performance management and people organizations, that is also an option, and it is an IC management job with IC technical expectations.
And
individual contributors.
How does the description the other gentleman gave of what a principal SRE would be expected to be doing in terms of leading a large implementation effort differ
Yeah, and I do a lot of career coaching at Google, so I'm very conversant in this conversation. So effectively the way that it works is it is about scaling yourself. And so at the lower levels, it's, can I do the job that is instructed to me? As you go up, can I self-generate tasks that I can execute myself? Can I self-generate tasks for another individual to contribute? Can I self-generate tasks for a team of people to contribute? Can I generate programs for a horizontal set of teams, right, up to the entire organization and changing cultural values at scale?
Okay, cool.
Right, and so the same is true, obviously. That the nature of that scaling is somewhat different depending on your role, but the same expectation of scaling is true regardless of whether you're an individual engineer or you're a manager. And so it may take the form of technical leadership if you're an engineer. Can I, create an architectural program that then other people are going to contribute individual libraries or individual tooling to a wider technical direction rather than a human direction about process and career path. But the scaling expectations are the same and are translatable at level across different job functions.
Yeah, thank you for the insight. One in the back.
So Kurt, you had asked for some examples on number 5 of things that would not be SRE work. And I figured I'd share this. We've been on a journey we call You Build It, You Own It for the last 18 months or so within Capital One. And we're transitioning lots of operational responsibilities to our application teams. And we've automated pretty much all of them. But when we think about SRE, we tend to think about maybe pipelines or monitoring, some level of automation. We're moving all of that over to our application teams, right? So our application teams, and You Build It, You Own It, they're responsible for everything from soup to nuts. So from feature development to deployments to their monitoring. Now, we kind of set the baselines and best practices and standards, and here's what you should be doing, and here's the tools and the automation. Pretty much everything, even from infrastructure provisioning in the cloud, if you're not familiar, Capital One is all in on the cloud. So we have been on that journey for the last couple of years. Everything is pretty much automated from soup to nuts, and we really put that in the hands of our application teams today. And that actually frees SRE up to kind of do additional things and further that process along.
Okay. Before you give away the mic, can I ask a question? One of the points of context that is often not well explored in these kinds of conversations, especially for organizations that have a further developed implementation or execution of SRE, is how long have you been pursuing the implementation of SRE? We know in Google's case it's from 2003 till now, so 16 years. But other organizations, the company just started 2 years ago, and so obviously not that long. So.
Yeah, no, we're in that boat. So since I've been at Capital One, a little less than 2 years, and my primary task has been implementing SRE since I've been there.
Okay, thank you for the insight.
Sure.
Another in the far back. And we are coming just about to the end, so this may be the last one. We will have the documents available, both the Slack channel and the Google Doc will continue to be available. We'll take and try to integrate the information from both of those and invite everyone else to continue participating and contributing to the documents. So please.
Hi, my name is Rebecca Barra. I'm a technical program manager at Etsy. I just want to know for the Google manager what their name is and if they're interested in having follow-up conversations.
My name is Amaya. My user is goth at Google, G-O-T-H. I have the goth chick at the front. It's kind of easy to find me. Yeah, I would love to have the conversation. I do a lot of career coaching, and I particularly love to do career coaching for inclusion and diversity, if anyone is in that category. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, thank you. And on that closing note, thank you so much for being a wonderful panel.